Today, we're diving deep into the fascinating science behind Kratom. You've probably heard of this traditional leaf from Southeast Asia, right? Well, we're going to break down exactly how its natural compounds interact with our brains to produce such a unique range of effects.
So here's the big question, the central mystery we're tackling. How can one single plant help someone feel a sense of calm, focus, while someone else might feel a brighter mood, or even find natural support from it? It sounds like a bit of a paradox, doesn't it?
Well, it turns out the answer isn't some single magic bullet. The research we're looking at points to this incredibly complex bit of neurochemistry. It's all about the unique way Kratom's compounds talk to a bunch of different key receptor systems in our brain pretty much all at once. So let's get into it.
Okay, we've got to start with the elephant in the room, the most notable, and frankly, the most misunderstood part of this story. Kratom's connection with opioid receptors. Now, it is absolutely crucial to understand that even though it interacts with these receptors, the way it does it is fundamentally different from traditional opioids.
And before we go any further, we have to lock in this key term, partial agonist. Just think about a lock and key. A full agonist is like a key that fits perfectly, turns the lock all the way, and bam, you get the receptor's maximum effect. But a partial agonist, which is what Kratom's main alkaloid is, acts more like a key that fits in the lock but only turns it, say, halfway. It still activates the receptor, but it just doesn't push it to its absolute limit. And that difference, it's everything.
And this slide just lays it out so clearly. On the right, you see traditional opioids. They're the full agonists, cranking that lock all the way for a really powerful full throttle effect. But then you look over at Kratom on the left. Its partial activation is much more gentle. The source material we're drawing from suggests this is how it can provide a sense of well-being without that heavy, overwhelming sedation that you might see with full agonists.
And the plot thickens when you realize there are actually three main types of these receptors. So that partial activation of the mu receptors, that's linked to the feeling of support. The weaker connection at the delta receptors, that might play a role in emotional balance. But honestly, the key part here might be what doesn't happen. There's very little activity at the kappa receptors, and that's a huge deal because it helps steer clear of the really unpleasant feelings that strong kappa activation can cause.
But look, the story does not end with the opioid system. Not even close. That's just the headliner on the ticket. To really get the full picture, you have to meet the supporting cast, all the other receptors Kratom interacts with. It really is a team effort. So let's talk about one of the most interesting effects people report. How can something make you feel calm, but also alert and focused at the same time? I mean, that sounds completely contradictory, right? But the science actually points us to a totally different receptor system.
And the answer seems to be with our adrenergic receptors. These are part of our body's stress response, the whole fight or flight thing. Kratom's main compound, mitragynine, seems to activate a specific type of these receptors, which is thought to be the reason behind that unique state of calm alertness, giving you that focus without the jittery, wired feeling you might get from a big cup of coffee. Okay, so we've got support, we've got alertness, but what about mood? Where do those reports of feeling emotionally balanced come from? Well, for that, we need to bring another major player in the brain into the picture.
And that would be the serotonin system, which I'm sure you've heard of for its huge role in regulating our mood. According to our source, Kratom seems to have a pretty mild, subtle influence here. We're not talking about a huge, dramatic effect, but more like a gentle nudge on the system. And that subtle interaction could be one more piece of the puzzle that explains why some people feel more emotionally steady.
Let's keep this train moving. Beyond mood, a lot of people talk about a real shift in their motivation and focus. So what's going on there? This question leads us right to the brain's reward and motivation circuits.
Yep, we're talking about the dopamine system, the brain's famous feel-good chemical that's all about reward, pleasure, and drive. The research suggests that Kratom doesn't hit this system directly, but might indirectly affect or moderate dopamine activity. And that subtle, indirect influence is very likely what contributes to those uplifting and motivational qualities.
Last but not least, let's talk about energy. We all know what a coffee boost feels like, right? It's a very direct, sometimes jittery kind of energy. But the way Kratom is thought to work is, well, a totally different ballgame.
And you can really see that difference here. Caffeine gives you that jolt because it literally blocks the receptors in your brain that make you feel tired. It's like putting a roadblock up. Kratom, however, doesn't seem to do that. This suggests that its effects on energy are coming from that whole team of other interactions we just talked about, not from flicking one single on switch like coffee does.
Whew,
Okay, so we've looked at 5 different receptor systems. It's been a journey. But now it's time for the big finale, putting all these puzzle pieces together to see the whole picture and understand what makes Kratom's chemical signature so special.
And this really is the main takeaway. The unique profile of Kratom doesn't come from one single, powerful action on one system. No, it's the result of this subtle, simultaneous symphony of interactions happening across multiple systems. It's the combination, that synergy, that truly defines it.
I love this analogy. Think of it like a combination lock. You can't just turn one dial and expect it to open, right? You need the right input on all of them to get the result. So you have the mu opioid dial for support, the adrenergic for calm alertness, serotonin for mood, dopamine for motivation, and that unique adenosine interaction. It's all of them working together, in concert, that creates the overall experience.
And, this quote from our source, Christopher's Organic Botanicals, just nails it. This combination of receptor activity sets Kratom apart from other herbs and gives it a unique place in the world of botanical wellness. That says it all. So, what we've seen is that Kratom's effects aren't magic. They come from a complex, fascinating chemical team working together in the brain. And that leaves us with a pretty exciting question, right? As science keeps digging into this traditional leaf, what other subtle interactions and new roles for these chemical players are we going to discover next?